So Josh Warrington got smoked like, what did he get smoked like?
Crispy bacon.
Crispy bacon or a Havana cigar? Yeah, he gets stopped. He loses. Well, he already relinquished his title. In fact, in retrospect, he should have fought Kid Galahad and kept his title, right? At least he would have kept his title going into the fight. But he chose to fight Mauricio Lara, an unknown Mexican puncher, a young guy, and he got battered from pillar to post, really. I would say it's never a good idea for a British fighter to exchange with a Mexican puncher. And particularly when you're talking about the small guys, the guys who are featherweights, lightweights, and so on. Never a good idea to be standing and exchanging with a Mexican puncher. In my experience over the decades, it always goes wrong, or nearly always goes wrong for the British fighter. So, yeah, Josh Warrington stopped, loses for the first time in his career. He's now 30-1, one loss by knockout, 7 KOs. Any of you who have seen the fight, it really speaks for itself. The commentary team was saying that Josh Warrington didn't seem himself. I mean, to me, he did seem himself. He was just in there with a guy who hit far too hard for him. And I'm going to do a separate breakdown about why, particularly in the lighter weight divisions, the Mexican fighters tend to hit a lot harder than the British fighters. Now, some of it could be down to genetics, body mechanics, people from that part of the world having physiques that give them more aptitude for power punching. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think that a lot of it comes down to the way they train. You see the way Josh Warrington throws punches? He's all trying to get 5, 6, 7 punch combinations off. Whereas with Lara, he was just loading up on these big swings. And these Mexican fighters, they typically throw punches in that kind of way, wide, looping, arcing shots. A lot of these Mexican punchers. I mean, even Jaime Munguia, right? Particularly earlier on in his career, he would throw these big, wide, looping shots. And from a technical point of view, people think, okay, well, he's throwing the punches wrong and all this kind of business. Like if you was in a British gym, oh no, you're not supposed to throw the punches that wide. But if you throw them at the right time, you know when to throw them and when it's safe to throw them, and you can get extra power throwing them like that. And by the way, you don't need to load up and bring your arm back from the next state in order to get power in the shot. But that's the way a lot of the Mexicans do it, okay? And for every 4 or 5 shots Josh Warrington was throwing, Lara was throwing 2 or 3, but they were doing far more damage. So as I say, I'll do a separate breakdown on why, particularly with the lighter weight divisions, the Mexicans seem to hit a lot harder. And not just the Mexicans, the South Americans in general seem to hit a lot harder than the British fighters. I mean, we saw Charlie Edwards have a similar experience to Josh Warrington in the not too distant past. Cal Yafai against Chocolatito, although he's not Mexican, he's still, South American and what have you. So that part of the world, yeah, if you're a little British fighter, do not exchange. In fact, to be honest with you, I would advise you don't even fight a Mexican puncher. Unless it's like you're a challenger and he's the world champion and it's your first attempt at a world title or something like that, or maybe your last attempt, okay, go for it. But in this particular instance, Josh Warrington deciding to take on Mauricio Lara for what reason exactly? I mean, he relinquished his IBF title instead of rematching Kid Galahad. He dropped the belt and fought this guy in, a tune-up? A stay busy fight? What was this really all about? I'm looking at the information here on BoxRec. There was no kind of regional belt on the line. Was it even a ranking fight? I mean, I don't know. So, yeah, it all went wrong for Josh Warrington. I think he played into the hands of Lara by standing and trying to trade with him. As I've already explained, it's not a good idea for little British guys to do that with Mexicans. He got beat up. He got badly hurt. I mean, that's the worst I've ever seen him hurt. Now, some people are talking about it being a massive shock. I'll tell you what was a massive shock for me, because we all have different perspectives and we all see things differently. What was a massive shock for me was Josh Warrington beating Carl Frampton. That blew my mind. I didn't think he could beat Carl Frampton. I thought Carl Frampton was on just a totally different level to Josh Warrington. Now with Lee Selby, I thought Lee Selby would, probably beat Josh Warrington. So that did surprise me a bit, but it's the Carl Frampton fight where I was really like, wow, okay, this Warrington guy is much better than I'd given him credit for, because I expected, looking at Josh Warrington prior to the Lee Selby and the Frampton fights, I expected the kind of thing that happened to him last night against the Mexican guy to happen much earlier on in his career. I never rated Josh Warrington at all. So that kind of thing, putting him in against some random Mexican and getting bashed up, I thought that would have happened a long time ago. He has done much better than I expected. So, as I say, this didn't really shock me. It's the things that Warrington achieved, the people that Warrington beat, that shocked me, in fact. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Josh Warrington losing to Mauricio Lara. I keep on having to scroll down and look at the guy's name. I forget his first name. Mauricio Lara, not one of the most well-known Mexican fighters out there, but at just 22 years of age, he may have a future in the sport. He certainly just took out one of the top guys in the division. He was actually knocked out, in one round back in 2018 by somebody who was 5-1-1. And he actually lost his pro debut to a guy who was 2-2 on a split decision. But of course, with these Mexican fighters, many of them don't have much of an amateur background. They turn professional very young as teenagers, and they really do. They learn it on the job. So, yeah, Warrington certainly didn't have the power to do what this guy did, Elliot Chavez, back in 2018 and knock out Lara in one round or in any round. Lara was never hurt in the fight. He did suffer a swollen eye, a damaged eye, but that was actually from a clash of heads or headbutt, however you want to describe it. Earlier on in the fight, there was a clash of heads and Lara kind of recoiled and he motioned to the referee that there was some kind of clash of heads. And after that, his eye started swelling. That wasn't from Josh Warrington punches. So it was Lara who was doing all the damage and Warrington who was getting battered from pillar to post. It really was tank versus a pea shooter stuff, where Warrington's punches were just like raindrops for Lara. But whenever Lara connected properly, Warrington was in all types of trouble. So again, I'll go into it in a separate breakdown as far as why particularly the smaller British fighters just cannot compete with the Mexican sluggers when it comes to punching power, and the South American sluggers in general. Because if you look at, for example, the Eastern Europeans, they have the same thing where they appear to hit, or they do hit much harder generally than the British fighters do, the smaller British fighters. It's down to the way they train. It's not just the genetics, it's the way they train. And you have to get fighters training that way from young, from when they're little amateur school kids. You get them training for power. Whereas in British gyms, this has been something I've been lamenting about for a long time. In the amateur system, they do not teach how to punch hard. It's all about point scoring and all this kind of stuff. And even in the professional gyms, to be honest with you, that I've been in over the years, there's not enough emphasis on power punch and how to punch hard. It's all about throwing a million combinations on the pads. If you watch the Eastern Europeans, the Mexicans, they're not trying to go for that much volume. They're trying to go for power. They're trying to teach when to punch, not throwing a billion combinations on the pads and all that kind of stuff. Quality over quantity. And when I'm talking about quality, the punches don't even have to look that pretty, but they have to be hard when they land. Marcus Maidana style, okay? Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Josh Warrington losing to Mauricio Lara. Where does he go from here? Can he rebuild? Should he have an immediate rematch? Because some people are talking about that. Eddie Hearn isn't one of those people. He said that it's too early to be talking about an immediate rematch because it was a devastating loss for Josh Warrington. He got knocked out badly. He was dropped, I think, twice. Was it in the fourth? Let me see. Yeah, fourth and the ninth he was dropped. And the fight was over in the ninth. So it was a devastating loss. And for me, yeah, he had his moments in the fight where he did land some good shots. But right from very early on, the first round he actually got hurt. Right from very early on, Lara just seemed like the boss in there to me. Even though Warrington had bits of success, he wasn't the ring general. It was all about Lara. And in a fight like that, when it goes like, it's not like, let's say AJ when he fought Ruiz, he had Ruiz on the floor, right? Warrington never hurt Lara in that way. And with only 7 KOs, I know he surprised me and he surprised Frampton with his ability to shake him up in that fight. Was that a one-off? You know, is he really? Well, he does have some knockout victories, right? But he goes the distance a lot. So he's certainly not a prolific puncher, if anything else. If his power is better than his record suggests, he's not a prolific puncher and he wasn't able to put a dent in Lara. I think he should stay away from that fight, to be honest with you. But then again, I tend to be cautious like that when it comes to immediate rematches and what have you. Maybe he'll feel like he needs to go back in there. And if he does go back in there with Lara, I mean, how should he approach it? He needs to stay away. He needs to box him. He needs to take advantage of the fact that Lara loads up and throws wide shots. And it's easier said than done, right? Charlie Edwards tried that. I think on the inside, with somebody like Lara, you shouldn't throw too many shots and you shouldn't try to exchange. Kind of like Andre Ward, right? When Andre Ward would come on the inside, he would maneuver you into a position where you were off balance. Then he would throw some shots. Then he would move off to the side and get out rather than just, you know, exchange it. Let's go. Let's both throw our best shots. No, that's what Warrington was doing. Throwing shots at the wrong time, just in all-out exchanges. You don't want to do that with Lara, clearly. If you're going to get in close, and again, I'm not saying he should never get in close, because if you just move around the ring all the time, you're going to get tired. It could be a Charlie Edwards type situation. Whereas if you box smart, keep your defenses high, move in, push the Mexican off balance, throw some body shots, and then get out again in a very kind of controlled, disciplined game plan, you know, Andre Ward style, then maybe he could get it done like that. In fact, before I go, one of the fights back in the days, which kind of reminded me, although this was over much more quickly, it reminded me a little bit of Josh Warrington. And this is the reason I say that small British fighters should generally not exchange with Mexicans, and in most cases should just avoid fighting them altogether. Eamon Loughran. He was a fighter from Northern Ireland back in the days. I remember this fight. He fought Jose Luis Lopez, and he got absolutely decimated. And he was on a nice little run, Eamon Loughran at the time. But I remember that Jose Luis Lopez fight. He just got battered. And in fact, really and truly, yeah, he had a draw early on in his career. Then he was disqualified a few years later. He had a no contest. So he never really lost decisively. But that fight against Lopez, the guy just walked straight through him. I remember watching that fight. It was a big shock at the time. And of course, Loughran never fought again after that. So it was clearly a big shock to him too. So anyway, come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.